What if the grandest, most beautiful buildings in your city are lying to you? What if those ornate city halls, domed capitol buildings, and impossibly intricate train stations weren't built in the horse and buggy era, but were actually inherited from a lost global empire? An empire with technology so advanced, its remnants are still powering parts of our world today, hidden in plain sight. This is the story of a civilization that's been wiped from our history books, an empire so vast that its very existence has become one of the internet's most explosive conspiracy theories. This is the story of Tartaria. You've seen those old photographs from the late 19th or 20th century. You've got muddy streets, people on horseback, and yet towering over them are these architectural masterpieces that seem impossibly grand. Believers in the Tartarian Empire theory ask a simple question. How did societies we think of as primitive manage to build such magnificent, elaborate stone megastructures? The theory gives a radical answer. They didn't. They just moved into the ruins of a far more advanced civilization that was mysteriously wiped out. A civilization whose forgotten tech we are still unknowingly using today. At the heart of this rabbit hole is a belief in a global empire called Tartaria. According to the theory, this wasn't just any old empire. It was a worldwide civilization that had achieved peace and possessed extraordinary technology. Its cities were stunning displays of engineering prowess, and its influence touched every continent. You've probably seen its alleged handiwork. The U.S. Capitol, the Great Pyramids, and countless other ornate Gilded Age buildings are often pointed to as Tartarian constructions. So where is this empire in our history books? Well, that's the conspiracy. Proponents claim Tartaria was deliberately erased from history by a shadowy cabal. This was supposedly done through a coordinated global effort to rewrite history, giving credit to Tartaria's architectural achievements to our more recent ancestors. Those grand world's fairs of the late 19th and 20th centuries, they're seen not as temporary parties, but the actual permanent cities of the Tartarians. Theorists argue these magnificent structures weren't torn down because they were temporary, they were torn down to hide the truth. The name Tartaria itself is lifted from real history, which just adds to the confusion. For centuries, Tartary was a real term used by European mapmakers, but it wasn't an empire. It was just a vague label for the vast, unmapped territories of Central Asia and Siberia. Conspiracy theorists, however, see these old maps not as proof of European ignorance, but as evidence of a forgotten global power. This idea, which started with Russian nationalism, has since gone viral, racking up massive viewership on platforms like TikTok and evolving into a worldwide conspiracy. But this theory is about more than just pretty buildings. It claims these structures were pieces of highly advanced functional technology. Chief among these claims is the idea of free wireless energy. According to proponents, the Tartarians had harnessed atmospheric electricity, creating a global grid that provided limitless power for everyone. How? Believers point to the iconic features of Old World architecture, those ornate spires on cathedrals, the intricate metal cresting on rooftops, and the massive domes on capitol buildings weren't just for show. They were supposedly antennas and energy accumulators, drawing power from the ether and distributing it wirelessly. Some theories even propose that the red bricks in many of these old buildings were a kind of energy storage device. Another key piece of this tech puzzle is the star fort. These are the massive star-shaped bastion forts found all over the world, which military historians know are defensive structures from the 17th and 18th centuries. But in the Tartarian story, their purpose was much bigger. Theorists claim these star forts were the power hubs for the global grid. Their precise geometric shapes were supposedly designed to channel powerful Earth energies, and some even claim they were anchor points for energy drawn from a hollow Earth. The proof for this global power grid is often just a matter of interpretation. Old photos showing deserted city streets are used to argue that these were post-cataclysmic scenes, with a few survivors inheriting a world they didn't build. The stark contrast between horse-drawn carts and towering ornate buildings is presented as proof that the people back then just didn't have the tech to create their surroundings. It all paints a picture of a utopian past with free, harmonious technology before it was all stolen and suppressed by modern elites who decided to monetize energy and rewrite history. So, if this high-tech global empire existed, what happened to it? The most common answer is one single cataclysmic event, the mud flood. Believers say sometime between the 18th and 19th century, a colossal wave of mud and rock swept across the entire planet, burying the Tartarian world. This wasn't just any flood, it was a civilization-ending disaster that supposedly wiped out most of the population and buried entire cities, leaving only the tops of the tallest structures poking out. The survivors, or the new people who came after, then dug out the upper floors and started new cities right on top of the old ones. The main evidence for this is an architectural quirk you can find in almost any old city: windows and doors that are halfway underground. Theorists ask, why would anyone build a grand doorway that leads straight into the dirt? To them, these aren't basements, they're the original ground floors of magnificent buildings, buried by a disaster we've all forgotten. They point to old photos of major excavation work in the 19th century and claim it isn't new construction, but the unearthing of a buried civilization. The rapid appearance of fully formed cities during this time is questioned, with the argument that it was impossible to build so much, so fast with the tools they had. They must have been inherited. This mud flood story ties it all together, explaining the destruction of Tartaria, the sunken buildings, and the supposed gaps in our history.
It's an incredible story, a sweeping epic of a lost golden age. But is any of it true? When you turn away from the YouTube videos and Reddit threads and look at historical archives, geological surveys, and archaeological records, a very different picture emerges. First off, let's talk about the name. Historians and map experts all agree there was never a unified Tartarian empire. Tartary was a vague term Europeans used for parts of Asia they hadn't really explored. The Russian Geographical Society, far from hiding Tartaria, has actively debunked the theory, even sharing its historical maps to show it was a geographic label, not a global empire. And what about those magnificent buildings? They have a well-documented history. The U.S. Capitol's construction is detailed in congressional records, from its cornerstone being laid in 1793 through numerous expansions into the 1860s. In Australia, buildings like Sydney's Queen Victoria Building have thoroughly documented construction histories, from the architects who designed them to the steam-powered cranes and steel frame technology used to build them. Those fantastical structures from the World's Fairs were never meant to be permanent. Historical records and photos show they were built as temporary attractions, using plaster and wood over steel frames, a common practice for expositions. Their demolition was planned from the start. Likewise, records from the regions once called Tartaria, like the secret history of the Mongols, tell stories of the Mongol Empire and other local powers, none of which look anything like the sci-fi civilization described by theorists. The conspiracy effectively erases the real, well-documented histories of indigenous cultures all over the world, claiming their pasts were fabricated to cover up Tartaria. With the historical record being so clear, what about the evidence that so many people find so compelling? It turns out there are simple, well-documented explanations for almost all of it. Let's start with the mud flood and those buried buildings. The reason old cities have doors and windows below ground has nothing to do with a global cataclysm. It's the result of centuries of urban development. As cities grew, streets were raised, often multiple times, to add new infrastructure like sewer systems and water mains. Paving over old cobblestone and the general accumulation of dirt and debris over hundreds of years naturally raised the street level. What looks like a buried floor is usually just a basement whose access was altered by a rising street. In cities like Seattle, parts of the downtown were deliberately raised by over 20 feet after a fire, a process that is thoroughly documented in city records. There's simply no geological evidence for a single global mud flood. And those eerie, empty streets in old photographs? That's not a post-apocalyptic world, it's a quirk of early photography. The long exposure times needed meant that anything moving, like carriages and people, became a blur or vanished from the image entirely. Only stationary objects, like buildings, stayed sharp and clear. The idea that our ancestors were too primitive to create these structures is a huge misunderstanding of 19th century ingenuity. This was the Industrial Revolution. They had steam power, advanced masonry, steel frames, and railways to move massive amounts of material. Building these grand structures wasn't impossible, it was a proud demonstration of their industrial power, all of which is detailed in countless construction logs and architectural journals of the time. The story of Tartaria shows how easily a compelling narrative can take root, especially when it claims to reveal a hidden truth. It's a great reminder of how important it is to question what we see and to look for documented evidence. What are your thoughts? Have you seen these Tartarian buildings in your own city? Let us know in the comments. So, if the evidence for Tartaria is so thin, why is the theory so popular? Because it isn't really about history, it's about today. Sometimes called the QAnon of architecture, it taps into a deep and growing distrust of experts and official stories. The theory offers a romantic explanation for a complex world. A beautiful, advanced civilization was destroyed and covered up by a malevolent elite who now control us. This narrative thrives on image-based platforms like TikTok and Reddit, where a single dramatic photo of a buried window can go viral without any context. The theory is designed to be engaging, making believers feel like they're freethinkers who've uncovered a secret that they don't want you to know. While it might seem like harmless fun, this blurring of lines can be dangerous. The narrative has been used to suggest that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is really an attempt to reclaim old Tartarian land. It often connects with other conspiracy theories that claim global elites are plotting to enslave humanity. Ultimately, the myth of the Tartarian Empire is a powerful story. It speaks to a desire for a lost golden age and provides a convenient villain for our modern problems. It turns the mundane reality of rising street levels and early camera technology into an epic of lost giants, free energy, and a global cover-up. It's a testament to the power of a good story, but it's also a stark warning about the importance of critical thinking in an age where an online fantasy can feel more real than history itself.